Hello, I'm Mischievous Mark Chinacchio, and I own every issue of Amazing Spider-Man, Amazing Fantasy number 15, and all of the annuals, which I say do not count.
And I'm Dapper Dan Gavassan, and I own every issue of Amazing Spider-Man, including the annuals, which I have always said definitely count. But for me, Amazing Fantasy 15 remains a fantasy.
Dan, I think for this episode, I need to ask you, how many copies of Amazing Spider-Man number 300 do you own?
I only own one, but 375 being my first issue, I think I have like 3 or 4.
Okay, well, I would like to add to my intro that I own 2 copies of Amazing Spider-Man number 300. Not intentionally, but go see Chasing Amazing or one of our Substacks, right? I think we told the story there.
There's an old podcast, I think maybe our 10th anniversary podcast also has like a recording of you and I discussing this story. It's somewhere in our back catalog. Who could really say?
Yeah.
But
yes.
But a very memorable Amazing Spider Talk Chasing Amazing moment from our history of why you have 2 of those issues.
For sure. So sorry to derail our intro, folks. Welcome to the Amazing Spider Talk, the show where 2 fans and collectors uncover the strange, fun, and fascinating history of the Spider-Man comic universe. And thanks for joining us for Venom, the 7th episode of season 7 of the Amazing Spider Talk.
Yeah, we've been holding off on talking about Venom in any real depth because we knew this episode was going to be coming. But if you want to subscribe along with us on our journey through Spidey's past, present, and future, subscribe to Amazing Spider Talk on your favorite podcast app, and be sure to leave us a review.
This podcast exists because of the support of our Patreon members. If you want to receive early reviews and seasonal episodes, exclusive podcasts, and artwork, and help us to keep this podcast going ad-free, please go to amazingspidertalk.com and click on the big Patreon button to sign up.
And Mark,
shut up.
And Mark, I will add, in the ongoing war between Dan Gavassan and Apple, Apple actually just lost a lawsuit this week, which means that they cannot charge an extra 30% for people that subscribe to Patreon through the Apple app. So that is back again as an option, and you'll have the same price as doing it anywhere else. So if for whatever reason you felt like you weren't going to sign up for our Patreon because of Apple's app, no worries. It seems like someone else has taken them to court on my behalf. I think I was included in the exhibits in that lawsuit, given how much I've complained about it. But nevertheless, in this season of the Amazing Spider Talk, we're traveling back to the late 80s and early 90s to an era of Spider-Man's history that saw his comic completely visually reinvented, with sales reaching a peak that will likely never be replicated, and a whole host of creative voices that would go on to change the comics industry forever. Yes, we are talking about the early half of writer David Michelinie's run on Amazing Spider-Man, where he worked alongside the founders of Image Comics, Todd McFarlane and Eric Larson, married off Peter Parker, and introduced the world to the hottest Spidey villain since the Ditko days, none other than Venom.
There we go. Apropos for this episode, where we're going to talk about the meteoric impact that Venom made when he first appeared in the pages of Spider-Man comics. So we thought, what better way to capture that spirit than going back into our catalog and re-releasing an older episode of Amazing Spider Talk from January 1988, where Dan and I apparently had internet technology and reviewed Amazing Spider-Man number 300, the first appearance of Venom when it first appeared on the spinner racks of our local supermarkets. Man, how has a show as advanced technologically of ours, Dan, be pulling the numbers that we pull right now? It's got to be Apple's fault, right? It's all about
Absolutely. But, Mark, I'm always on the cutting edge of technology, whether it was the internet or like record clubs. I found a way to get Amazing Spider Talk into people's hands and ears in 1988. And, if we still had the Amazing Spider Talk back issues feed, like this is straight from that feed. So right. We hope you really enjoy. What's
recorded
that?
On my Apple, it's recorded on my Apple 2LC, I think,
Yeah, right. Like this is like even before the iPod exists, and now we're in an era where the iPod doesn't exist anymore. And Thus, the word podcast has no meaning to anyone. But
Wasn't
Mark,
this on a floppy disk or no? I'm sorry.
a record, Mark. We're printing on vinyl. So, Mark,
All right,
I
all
was
right.
only 2 years old, but I was ready to get ahead on the podcasting game. I think listeners will be surprised by my language and grasp of Spider-Man mythology, even at that age. So at the very least, I'm excited that you'll get to hear our show in its infancy, if only because I was an infant. But if you want to read along with our conversation, all you have to do is grab your copy of Amazing Spider-Man 300 or borrow one of Mark's, which can be found just about anywhere, especially if you have a time machine, and come along with us back to the 1980s. But before we travel back in time, let's talk about Venom's history as a character, where he came from, and what he means to us now. Mark, I think it's safe to say that neither of us would be collecting Spider-Man comics today if it weren't for Venom and maybe the comic that we're going to talk about today, Amazing Spider-Man 300. Do you think that's fair to say for you and Venom?
I think so. I mean, I would like to puff out my chest and say I'm probably one of the few people listening to this show at the moment who paid $1.50 for this comic. So there you go. But yeah, let's we kind of touched on some Venom stuff in our the bad guys, or what were they, the greed is good bad guys,
greed is good guys, yeah.
Episode, but let's do a proper, like, here are the stats for Venom. So if you have your trading cards from the early 90s, you could pull it out. Venom was created by David Michelinie and Tom McFarlane, and we first saw his shadow. I was going to say in Amazing Spider-Man number 298, but I'll get to that in a bullet point here. But then we had his first full appearance in 299, and then his first full story in Amazing Spider-Man number 300. So, when it comes to his first appearance, I mean, you really can just kind of like pick your poison here, your Venom. Pick your Venom. But for all intents and purposes, 300 is kind of considered the first full Venom. Anyway.
Yeah, and even that's complicated because, like, the symbiote is something that predated him in a huge way. But,
sure.
We're talking about an invention on top of an invention,
right.
You don't get Miles Morales without Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, even though they had nothing to do with that. Tracing these things back to their core origin is tough. And Venom, more so than most, is one of those villains that arrives after a linear legacy of storylines.
Right. And what is technically the symbiote's first appearance? Is it 252?
Right.
Is it Marvel Secret Wars 8? Whatever.
Yeah.
But I should note that Michelinie actually had been seeding Venom for years prior to his first appearance in Amazing Spider-Man, because if we're going to be very technical about it, his first appearance was Web of Spider-Man number 18, because there was this mysterious hand that pushed Peter in front of a moving train that didn't set off Peter's spider sense. And was it actually retconned in like the comics, or was it just something in an interview? But it was like confirmed this was Venom that was pushing him, right?
Yeah, I mean, I know that, like, I believe it was Jim Salicrup and David Michelinie both mentioned it on our show and in other interviews as well, that like this was intended to be someone like an earlier iteration of Venom, but like would be retconned to be Eddie now. And I think it makes sense. It's fine. Maybe the hand doesn't look like Eddie's hand necessarily, but and then also, like, just 6 issues later in Web of 24, there's a scene where Peter climbs out of a window to change costumes into the Spider-Man costume, and a black arm grabs him through a window, and it doesn't trigger his spider sense, and we got no answer for that. So you can see the sort of evolution of, like, okay, this one actually had the sort of the symbiote on it in some form. And we're already seeing the not triggering the spider sense appearing in both of those things. So you can see some of these nascent elements starting to show up across the books.
Yeah, and then of course we had the symbiote being introduced in, we'll say Secret Wars #8 because I think that was the first instance of establishing that this was an alien thing, even though like in Amazing Spider-Man prior to that there was something off about Peter's new black costume that he got in this mini series that was running. And then of course Eddie Brock was in Amazing Spider-Man #300 for the first time, and he was a guy who grew to hate Spider-Man, so it was the merging of the rejected symbiote and a guy who just hated Spider-Man and Peter Parker. It's worth noting, of course, that, and as was noted on our show and like kind of poo-pooed by Tom DeFalco also on our show, David Michelinie's other pitch was for Venom to be a she, and that origin involves a woman who was driven mad after she goes into labor and her husband and child are killed riding in the taxi with her because the driver was distracted by Spider-Man. DeFalco, I think, tactfully said, we shot it down for something more traditional for Amazing Spider-Man #300. and then it's worth noting that like Todd McFarlane was basically given carte blanche to like just let this idea run wild. And we talked about that extensively in our Todd Father episode. Dan, do you want to talk a little bit about like what made Venom, besides just like his hulking presence and evil Spider-Man-isms, what other things about him kind of made him a unique character?
Well, sure. I mean, I think, and we're going to get into it, I think, when we flash back and listen to that old recording from 1988, like that, you know, I'm not sure necessarily that all of these things would really come out of that first story more than just that really iconic visual. But there are some characteristics to how like Michelinie wrote him that really kind of set him apart. You know, he has this moral code that includes not killing innocents, however he defines that. And ultimately, I think this would go on to kind of like form the backbone of his kind of like lethal protector kind of thing, and allow him to become the sort of like anti-hero we know him to be today, when he's not like traversing the cosmos or being Mary Jane. You can push back on this if you want, but I think he's kind of written to be a somewhat funny character. It's not like Deadpool, haha, but there is a sort of like winking, like silliness to Venom in his kind of like arch monster kind of like personality about him.
Yeah, there's a dark humor, I would say. I mean, it's you know, he's evil Spider-Man, but like evil with like, I mean, a big toothy grin.
Yeah.
And, you know, like it's kind of weirdly funny.
I mean, even his first appearance, you know, with the like kind of the honey, I'm home, it, you know, is a sort of like joke, kind of appearance. It's sinister, but there's something dark and humor about it. And I think that sets the character aside. And I'm always reminded of that when Michelinie comes back to do the sort of like flashback modern stories that he's telling. He writes Venom how he used to, and it's very different than the Venom we kind of get today. Although I feel like the movies kind of tap into this a little bit.
For sure.
He famously uses the sort of like we, us, ours pronouns when referring to themselves. Although the symbiote starts off silent, and for like 4 decades was silent until that was changed by Donny Cates. And that whole era of Venom comics. And I tend to like the symbiote as a silent personality, but like when Cates was writing it, I think he did a lot of really cool stuff with that.
For sure.
It is, and here's probably the biggest misconception about the Venom and the symbiote is that the symbiote has been known to amplify aggression in its host. But this is more of an invention of the 90s television show that I think was born from Michelinie making the symbiote uniquely angry at Peter for rejecting it, and that combining with Eddie Brock, rather than the symbiote being a sort of like malevolent force that makes people angry, because its goal with Peter when it was controlling Peter was really only to do heroics while Peter was sleeping.
It just wants a host. That's, you know, it's not malignant and wanting to. I mean, that's literally how it survives, is by bonding with a host. So it's going to do whatever will ingratiate it to its host and its personality.
Yeah, and it's funny because like that element of the character has weirdly, I think, kind of been downplayed.
Right.
While the other stuff has gone up, the very kind of like essential nature of the host kind of stuff.
Right.
Its big weaknesses historically have been like fire and sonics, which I think has kind of retroactively been justified with the suggestion that there's no fire or sonics in space, which I don't know. You could argue that, but comic book logic deems that is right. And so symbiotes never adapted to them. And obviously over the years, Venom would eventually gain a million different backstories, rules, and motivations that would make anybody cross-eyed to try to understand it. And Donny Cates did the best he possibly could to like straighten that all out, and more power to him.
Yeah.
And the same goes for Power Set. He has all of Spider-Man's powers, except that he can also camouflage its host, with different outfits, or blend into the wall sometimes. He can't be tracked by spider sense. He has a thing called and this is never referenced, a dimensional aperture, which is like a small pocket that he can hide things in that don't add to his mass. Like it's some sort of D&D campaign, and he's got a portal to another dimension in a bag.
Just what you need, right?
Yeah, just what you need. And of course, there's some kind of telepathic link between the symbiote and the host. And anytime a creator needs a new power for Venom in the comic, they'll feel free to add it. And I can't keep track of all the things Venom can do at this point, because it truly is down to what does the story need? Okay, he can do that now.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, that's a pretty good summary of Venom. Dan, are you ready to hop into our internet archive time machine, to a time before there was an internet?
Yeah, so where are we going? Let's beep, boop, beep, enter in those dials.
All right, Marty. We're going to January 12th, 1988, when Dan and I first reviewed Amazing Spider-Man number 300. Great Scott! Back when it first came out. Man, it's crazy to think we've been podcasting this long. I said, Dan, if we were still podcasting in 1998, I would quit. And here we are. Anyway.
And, those Back to the Future jokes were probably just as hot and relevant in 1988 as they are today.
For sure.
Yes, it does feel like it was only yesterday. I bet we sound totally different. I had hair. You were just getting out of your Long Island iced tea phase. Those were different times. So let's go into the Wayback Machine and listen to our ASM 300 review.
Hello, I'm mischievous Mark Ginocchio, and I'm trying to collect every issue of Amazing Spider-Man, including Amazing Fantasy number 15, but not all of those annuals. I think there's like 21 of them. It doesn't matter because I say they do not count.
And I'm Dapper Dan Gavaston, and I too am trying to collect every issue of Amazing Spider-Man, including all 21 annuals, which I say definitely count, especially last year's. I mean, come on, Mark. But man, Amazing Fantasy 15 is going to have to remain a fantasy for me, because that book costs like $800, and that's like 4 Nintendos.
Yeah, man. You don't want those. You'd rather just play. Well, is there like any like boss battle Nintendo games you're into right now, Dan? Or
I mean, I'm two,
whatever.
so like my thumbs can't really do a lot of that stuff. But like Bubble Bobble sounds good.
Yeah, I mean, the battle system in Legend of Zelda is pretty sweet, I gotta say, Dan. I just like the BA thing. Anyway, Welcome to the Amazing Spider Talk, the show where two fans and collectors uncover the strange, fun, and fascinating history of the Spider-Man comic universe. Thanks for joining us for this review episode of The Amazing Spider-Man. I just cannot believe there have been 300 issues of Amazing Spider-Man, Dan. It just feels like this book has been around forever.
Yeah, I mean, like, when are they going to get to, like, giving us, like, a new number one? Like, can people really jump in, like, at this high of a number? We'll talk about that later. But if you want to swing along with us on our journey through Spidey's past, present, and future, subscribe to the Amazing Spider Talk Record Club. where you can get each new episode in the mail on the finest pressed vinyl we can afford, which may not be much, but, it's going to come in the mail, and just like your Columbia Record Club, you're going to be enjoying it.
For $8 for a penny, Dan. This discussion exists because of the support of our Record Club members. I play my records on my Fisher-Price player currently. If you want to receive early reviews, seasonal episodes, exclusive records, and sleeve artwork, and help us keep these recordings going, maybe even on the radio someday, please send a self-addressed stamped envelope to Amazing Spider Talk's headquarters in Dan's parents' basement. I mean, I don't know why I'm laughing. This is our usual intro, Dan.
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. Well, yes, my mom has been putting them at the top of the stairs for me, and I'm really appreciating that, because then I don't have to leave the house. But today on the show, Mark and I will be discussing Amazing Spider-Man number 300. This issue was written by David Michelinie. The cover features artwork by Todd McFarlane and Bob Sharon. The interior pages feature artwork by Todd McFarlane, colors by Bob Sharon, and of course, letters by Rick Parker. This issue was first released on January 12th, 1988. Mark, hit us with a recap of the events of Amazing Spider-Man number 300.
You bet, Dan. I just got to turn off this episode of Full House here. Okay, we open on Mary Jane, and she looks terrified. A dark, shadowy figure descends on her, but it's black-suited Peter, and she's relieved. She tells Peter a monstrous-looking thing was wearing his costume. Peter is concerned by how rattled MJ is, or as Balky Bartukamus would say, don't be ridiculous. We then flash over to the black-suited imposter. The suit removes itself and reveals a muscle-bound guy who wants to pump you up. So not that Phantom of the Opera guy on Broadway like I was predicting. But anyway, back to Peter, and he speculates that while he doesn't know who the guy is, it's probably someone wearing the alien costume he picked up in Secret Wars. And Salakar provides us all the details with a recap of the events of Amazing Spider-Man number 258. Are these the extra pages we are paying a whole $1.50 for? I mean, it's just recaps. Anyway, Peter is then greeted by a scantily clad MJ, and that's worth an extra 75 cents right there. And then he's off to recover the sonic ray he used against the alien in 258. Later, Peter is walking the street and he feels like he's being followed, and the mysterious muscle guy is behind him, not setting off his spidey sense, interestingly. Maybe it's the son of Sam. Well, that was like 10 years earlier, but whatever. Peter then starts taking photos of MJ, and she senses that he's down in the dumps. But that all changes when she gives him some private shots. Hey now. Later, Aunt May has company at her boarding house like it's Miss Garrett with Blair and Joe. Blair! And she and MJ and Peter share a moment. Tootie! Whatever. The muscle guy, Eddie Brock, is in a church, and a cop approaches him, and the black alien appears. The man uses his webbing to suffocate the cop, bemoaning the death of an innocent. Peter and MJ are having a moving party, and Peter and Robbie share their moment, but then Peter sees the black costume imposter swinging in the distance. He soups up as Spidey and goes in pursuit and gets wallops for his troubles. The character introduces himself as Venom, and Peter thinks he's nuts. The guy starts orating, and it turns out that he used to be a columnist for the Daily Globe, and he had an exclusive with the Sin Eater. But wait, that's not Stan Carter. Anyway, Spider-Man catching the real Sin Eater ruined Eddie's life, revealing his scoop as an utter fraud. He's been plotting his revenge ever since. Look, man, it's no headless body and a topless bar, so this guy just needs to get over himself, okay? In his weakest moment, Eddie was joined by the symbiote in the church from Web of Spider-Man number 1. Spidey, sensing the end of Eddie's monologue, then makes his move for the Sonic Blaster, but Venom is able to counterattack. Spider-Man swings a beam and then busts out the blaster, which unbonds the alien long enough for Spidey to make an escape. But no! Venom snares him and pulls him back. Now Spidey is spun up in a ball of web inside a giant church bell. Spidey is able to punch his way out, which brings Venom back to the scene of the crime. The two fight in the church tower, and Spidey deduces that the symbiote is probably out of webbing, and indeed, Venom crashes to the ground. Spidey is able to bring Venom to the Fantastic Four in Craggly Rock Thing, and then Spidey returns to MJ, who says she can't deal with him being in the black costume anymore. So a happy Christmas later, a legend begins anew. and Spidey is back in the red and blues and swinging through Mayor Koch's New York City, which has just lost all the character and vibrancy that I normally like to complain about. How am I doing, everyone? How am I doing to all, and to all a good night?
You know, Mark, you were right about that extra 75 cents for those pinups for MJ. Normally, I'd have to go to Times Square to get something like that. Oh, anyway, let's talk about this comic. This is 2-year-old Dan Gavoston making that joke. Let's talk about the cover of this issue because, man, they are really going all out on this 300th issue. It isn't even subtle about it at all. I mean, 300's everywhere. But, Mark, did you know it's also the 25th anniversary issue? Isn't that convenient? I mean, come on now, editorial.
I know, right? I mean, like, what's the deal with, like, making, like, these big anniversary issues? I mean, what's next? Are they going to do, like, special, like, refractor covers or something? You know, you get those refractor baseball cards back in the, Dan here? I mean, like...
Yeah. Even at 2, I was into baseball and the stats and all those rookie cards.
You bet. I mean, your Darryl Strawberry rookie is probably worth a ton right now. But anyway, no. But I thought it's a cool cover. I mean, like it's a little overdone, but it's not like, I mean, the comic industry every once in a while, I guess, can kind of rock it up a little bit. It's not like they're gonna do anything too crazy in the future.
Yeah, no, and like, you know what? For all the covers of Spidey losing on them, like, it's nice to have a nice, like, I don't know if this is a victory pose, but like a cool pin-up like this. Like I wouldn't mind them doing another thing like this in the future. It's not like they're just going to repeat this cover over and over and over again, including for the next issue. Like, every once in a while doing something special like this is really nice.
Yeah, no, but the thing I did want to talk about, and you can even see it on the cover, is McFarlane's webbing. Like, it's so thick and spindly. I mean, like, it almost kind of looks like spaghetti. I mean, I guess that's kind of cool, but also seems kind of random. I mean, like, what is the Ditko Ramita webbing? It's not good enough anymore? Like, what's this guy doing here?
You should trademark that, Mark. Put that on as a credit to you there. Spaghetti webbing, right? Like, right up in lights.
They probably won't credit me anyway. They'll probably say it's been around for years or something. I just haven't noticed it.
Oh yeah, Michael Golden's been doing it. Anyway,
Michael who? I mean, you mean the Marvel fanfare guy? Come on,
that's preposterous. It is cool looking. I'll say, like, it may be a deviation, but like it seems special, and like, honestly, like I like that McFarlane feels a little more like himself in this issue. The past 2 issues, I think, he's really been trying to lean into the Romita stuff instead of like what he was doing on Incredible Hulk. And like here, I feel like we're getting the stylist back. Even how he bends Spidey on the cover, like how does his legs do that? Why is his chest all bent up like that? Are his hips 3 feet wide? I don't really care. It looks cool, and I have to imagine how cool this cover would look if the red and blues were back.
All I could say, Dan, is if when I'm on the playground, having that kind of hip mobility would be like awesome. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, the fluidity of Spider-Man is a sight to behold here. Although, I'm not one to comment on house ads, but I got to comment on something here, Dan, if it's okay with you.
Go for it.
We open up this. After we get past this glorious cover, the first house ad is for this Captain Power thing. I don't know. Do you have one of these, Dan? I got to tell you, this for me, this thing just doesn't work. I'm like sitting there on Sunday mornings, like at the TV, and you're like shooting this like little spaceship, and it's like supposed to like interact with the TV, and like I'm just doing this like all morning aimlessly, and then every once in a while like my guy like ejects out of the seat. This thing is a waste of money. Like G.I. Joe, it's not. I don't even know what they're doing here. Like it's like they're trying to be G.I. Joe, they're trying to be Transformers. Not a fan. Waste of money. Don't do Captain Power. Okay.
All right, I won't. I don't know that I can though. I anyway, because I've been in my Johnny Jumper all afternoon, and that's kind of like really dominating my time.
Got it. Okay. Well, anyway, let's talk about Peter and MJ in this comic.
Yeah, sure. Like the first actual scene that we kind of get of them is Mary Jane being terrified of Peter coming home, which follows up the previous issue. And like, I thought this was a fairly effective way of kind of setting up the stakes here. And, like, Mary Jane, who's normally so hip and cool and unfazed, is, like, totally terrified here. And, like, it made me really excited to see what would be coming next.
You're just excited to see MJ, I think, the way she's being portrayed in this issue, right? I mean,
like, the hair is a lot, it's extensions capital over here. But I did think it was funny that, like, she gets upset that the person that broke into the house was, like, looking for her boyfriend and didn't know that they were married. Like, what? Is everybody supposed to know about the comings and goings of the Parkers and their, like, romance? It's not like they were married in Shea Stadium where everybody could see them, what? We're all supposed to be reading the New York Times for a wedding announcement?
yeah, but to be fair, I mean, like, what was the engagement? Like, was it even an issue of the comics? I mean, like, they just kind of rushed this whole thing in there. I mean, whatever. I mean, like, if Marvel itself is not going to, like, keep track of its continuity here, like, why should we expect, like, the characters in this comic to keep track? You know what I mean? Like, they're just like, whatever, married now.
Well, boy, what a marriage it is, because I look forward to marriage. I mean, I've got a while now. I'm still in diapers, but when I do get married, Mary Jane, like, or my wife, might not be wearing much more than diapers.
Wow, I mean, Dan, I mean, that comment is almost as weird as an underwear shot of MJ in this comic. I mean, what's going on here, Dan? I mean, besides you talking about your wife in diapers here.
Well, no, I'm not saying she's going to be in diapers. I'm just saying, like diapers is just about as much coverage as this lingerie is providing.
Gotcha.
And to that regard, I'm actually really, like, grateful that Michelini seems to be leaning hard in on this marriage thing. In this comic, that big stunt, a few months back, now we seem to actually be incorporating it into the comic. And I got to admit, like, it seems like he's writing a really nuanced and realistic version of marriage. And I'm looking forward to having a marriage that operates exactly like this in the future, where I can just wake up every morning and see my wife posing in, like, high-end underwear.
Well, it's a little weird to me because I just feel like all MJ is doing is stripping in this book. I mean, like, I haven't seen a redhead this sexed up since, like, Mona on Who's the Boss on Tuesday nights. So, like, it just seems a little reductive, don't you think?
I don't know. You seems like you've been reading all your women's lib books. Not everybody can be Gloria Steinem.
That's quite the reference there, Dan. You're really digging in deep to your lit book, aren't you?
Yeah, well, I have to admit, though, like, as much as I, like, didn't mind MJ in her lingerie, like, Michelini's writing where he says, slowly Peter's spirits seem to rise. Look, I may be too, but, like, that is not subtle. Even I got what is happening there.
Yeah, and then of course they're moving into Bedford Towers, so I guess, no more crappy Peter apartment anymore, huh?
Yeah, I mean, the thing I appreciate about this is, like, how practical Peter is about the move, starting with, will it have a skylight? The priorities are really coming in here. It's a tower, Peter. They got to be a way to get in as Spider-Man.
I mean, will there be a trash compactor? I know those are kind of all the rage right now, right?
All right, let's talk about Eddie Brock, because, like, boy, man, this came out of nowhere.
Yeah, he's just like some bodybuilder. I kind of didn't get it initially. I mean, it seemed like a very random character to plop into a centennial issue like this. Like, you would think, I don't know, like Marvel instead for a 300th, 25th anniversary issue, they would, come up with some kind of epic origin story, or I mean, I guess they can't bring back Norman Osborn at this point. I mean, he's dead. I mean, that would be ridiculous. But, like, some random musclehead. I mean, okay, so he's got the alien from Secret Wars, but also, like, why is Marvel still pushing this book from 3 years ago? I mean, like, and isn't, like, Jim Shooter been fired? Like, I mean, what are we doing here? I mean, like, do they want to sell more action figures? It seemed a little too cynical for me. I don't know. What about you?
I mean, look, not everything can be as epic as the Return of the Burglar was in issue 200. right?
That's true. That's true.
But like, I got to admit, I kind of like it. Like, not all the villains I think need to be seeded by dozens of issues. Ditko didn't do that,
Hmm.
and I'm sure over
Yeah.
time they'll flesh this out and make it very clear what the symbiote's backstory is and who Eddie Brock is and how all of this works. But for right now, in this story, I thought it actually really worked for me. And besides, it's been a while since we last saw the symbiote. I'm glad someone's doing something with it. It was. I felt like it was too cool to just get rid of it. And then hear me out on this, Mark. But like, I think Michelini's been seeding this across Web of Spider-Man for a while. Do you remember those like hands that pushed Peter onto the subway and pulled him into that apartment?
I don't know, Dan. This sounds like one of your conspiracy theories again. I mean, where are you pulling this from?
I don't know. I found it really kind of insane that someone would accidentally push someone onto the subway without shouting "Look out!" So it must have been Sinister, back in that issue of Web of Spider-Man, and I think this is it. I think this is the payoff for that. He's been playing the long game.
I mean, I think it would be really cool if like if this character had like the clothes from like when Peter and MJ first kissed on, and like maybe had like the bandages around his hands too. I mean, like that would really be something pretty interesting in terms
What
of
would that have
secret
anything to do with this, Mark?
I don't know, but like he seems to be stalking Peter and MJ. I mean, like there seems to be something going on with the two of them. So I'm just saying, like that.
Only a crazy person would posit a theory like that.
All right, fair enough. But so is like saying like some random ham from Web of. Who even reads Web of? I mean, no offense. I mean, it's like the third book in line right now.
Yeah, well, look, it's not like they're putting out like early previews of upcoming issues that I could read, so I have to read Web of. Like that's where I'm going to get all my kind of future Spider-Man talks, and it seems to pay off here. Although I was confused because like Peter in this issue reacts like he knows Eddie Brock. He like immediately recognizes him, and like I don't know. Look, I didn't need a lot of this seated earlier, but it would be nice to like have had some recognition on behalf of the audience of who this character was.
Yeah, I guess so. But so when we do get to like some of that backstory that that they were kind of dumping into this, I got to admit I did find it curious that this character seems to be based on stuff regarding the Senator. I mean, like, okay, I guess. I mean, that seems like a pretty random story to unearth here. I mean, I know people really liked that story. I mean, Peter David, I guess, did a good job, but like, couldn't they just like find some other random like Daredevil story to reference instead? I mean, who is quoting the Sin Eater in a story after the fact at this point? Like, I just can't imagine someone building a new villain around the Sin Eater. That just seems like an absurd thing to be doing at this point in time.
Yeah, and even here they say like all of this backstory happened, quote, between the lines, end quote, which is a great way of saying we're making this up all right now. That said, though, I love the visuals of how Eddie becomes Venom, and the line, "A shadow moved, caressed me." Like, that's always had a lot of emotion in it, and like I've reread this comic a bunch of times, and it always stands out to me as like this interesting line that tells you a lot about who this kind of Eddie Brock guy is.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I got to tell you, my favorite part about this Brock guy is that he doesn't set off the spider sense. I mean, I can't think of that happening before outside of like Peter like losing his sense in the story, like he did against the Hobgoblin a few years ago. But it seems like this is a little deeper than that. It's not that he lost it; this guy just doesn't set it off.
Yeah, that's a really unique take. Speaking of another character that doesn't set off Peter's spider sense, Aunt May when she's about to hit him with a vase. But here we've got Aunt May, and we visit her back at her like boarding home, and I got to admit, Mark, like this Aunt May Nathan Lubezki thing has gone on for too long. There's no development here. It's the same beat being done to death, where he's like, Peter, why aren't you like attending to Aunt May? What a terrible nephew you are. You know what, Nathan Lubezki, I'm ready for you just to go and die, because like if this storyline isn't going to progress, it's just going to die. And I'm not ready for another run to just repeat this beat over and over again.
For sure. Are you saying you are boarding with Nathan Lebesky and Aunt May shipping here, Dan? I mean,
I
like
would if I was as good of a pun master as you are, Mark.
there you go. But like, look, I I'm sure like this Nathan thing is gonna end soon enough, and like, hopefully after this we never get like an Aunt May romance again, because I just don't need to be dealing with like Aunt May dating or maybe getting married to someone. Like that's just weird.
I
Like
just
what are we
don't even
doing
want to
here?
think about like Aunt May's sex life, much less see it
Yeah,
on the page. So
yeah,
like
for sure. Oh
that's something I think
God.
we could all avoid.
I mean, fortunately, as risque as Michelini is, it doesn't seem like that's a bridge he would cross. I can't imagine the creator who would like try and show that on a page. That's
But
insane.
I mean, if all marriages are like this, like it's only inevitable if something were to actually like come together between Aunt May and Nathan or whoever you seem to be proposing in the future.
All right, moving on, Dan. Let's talk some more about Venom, because we just watched him kill a cop in this comic, but then he bemoans the death of innocence, so he's got a moral code. I guess Blue Lives Matter here, but it could be interesting here depending on how Marvel uses this, right?
What is this Blue Lives Matter thing, Mark? Are you coming up with some kind of catchphase? I'm not. I'm not certain of this.
Okay, I forgot that you're Amish, Dan. Never mind. Keep going.
All right, all right. Yeah, no, I thought that moment was interesting, and it also like McFarlane goes out of his way to make the cop look as youthful as possible. Like, it might as well have been Corey Haim, like standing in that uniform there, and I thought that was really interesting. It really like tells you just like that he's willing to kill like people in their prime, but also can kind of bemoan having to do it.
I mean, I'm Team Feldman all the way, but that's okay.
Mm.
So I'm like watching this fight here, Dan, and like I don't think I've ever seen Spider-Man get ragdolled like this. I mean, like they're really going like all in on establishing Venom as the next big thing. And also like the fact that they fight in this church from like Web of Spider-Man #1, but like we saw this ending already in Web of Spider-Man. So like, couldn't they like do something else? I mean, like, where's the creativity here that you would expect in a comic like this?
Oh yeah, like the next big thing, like it's so typical of these writers to come on this book and just like invent a new villain that's like the most powerful villain that Spider-Man has ever fought. They kind of constantly one up the previous guy, and oh, you thought Hobgoblin was bad? What about Venom? He's like stronger than the Hulk. Like it's just becoming a trope. I think that is like kind of tired at this point.
I guess so. Although I gotta say, like, the Hobgoblin. I mean, ever since they revealed him as Ned Leeds, a dead Ned Leeds, I'm kind of like down on the Hobgoblin. So if they want to make Venom better than that, I guess. But
You were such a big fan of the Hobgoblin too. Like
I know
it's been sad to watch this journey play out.
I know. I have not been this let down in a Spider-Man comic since the Jackal reveal, I think. But that's okay. I do want to, as our pop culture resident here, I do want to point out like an Exorcist joke. I mean, like, we're going back to the 1970s now. I mean, yeah, I guess Exorcist 3 is coming out soon, but it seems like we're trying to siphon off some heat off of something that's a little dated here. I mean, we gotta do better than this, right?
Yeah, it's like if they brought back like Spider-Man making Beatles references again, but like in 1988, I get it. People still like the Beatles, but like, can we find something a little more contemporary?
Yeah,
yeah.
like maybe Poltergeist. I mean, even that's a few years ago, but like I don't know, they're here. I mean, whatever. The kids in the TV.
Yeah,
it's a little weird.
Are they going to fight in like a tree that's come to life all of a sudden? I don't know the scenario. They're getting sucked into a closet, into like a portal or something.
You built the church on a graveyard, Dan. I mean,
okay, fair enough. Yeah.
I mean, Craig T. Nelson. I mean, good character actor. I can't see him doing much else though going into the future.
Yeah, I mean, look, I was fine with this. Like, it's a kind of a dramatic scene, of like Spider-Man's breakup with the symbiote. I'm like okay with it, but it's wildly inconsistent. Like, we found out that the church bells were like separated, like Venom or the symbiote from Spider-Man, but here the bell is just ringing back and forth, and Venom is hanging out with the bells, and Spidey has to like, drain Venom's webbing to defeat him. I mean, I guess you're right. It would be really lame to have him defeated by the Bells again, but like, if you're gonna do it here, at least be consistent.
Yeah, for sure. Um, do you want to talk a little bit about the ending with Cragley Rock thing, and also what's with Felix the cat? Like, I mean, it just feels like, I don't know, like putting the Fantastic Four back in this kind of feels like it's getting inserted into the story like it was attached with a rivet gun, because it's like I mean, you know, we've gotten the whole issue without the Fantastic Four. I mean, I guess they're trying to do what, a callback to 258.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Yeah, but I noticed the Felix the Cat thing too, and I don't know what the heck that's about. Like, I'm gonna keep my eye on it, in case
Yeah.
it's like some like slowly simmering thing in the background, that's gonna pay off in 100 issues, like this book likes to try to do. But like for now, we'll kind of just like pocket that one. Look,
Amazing Spider-Man number 400 comes, and it's Mr. Magoo, and he kills Aunt May, right? I mean, come on.
yeah, I mean, it's not like she would die from something like a bomb in her head, So
No,
it might as well be
no.
Mr. Magoo.
Or maybe they pay an actor to be Mr. Magoo, and I don't know, whatever. It just seems weird. Anyway,
Okay,
we're just banning.
maybe
here.
it could be
What
like
the
the actor from Fantastic Voyage, Leslie Nielsen. Like that could be an interesting casting for Mr. Magoo.
Yeah. I think is he gonna do that, some like police squad movie or something? That sounds pretty cool.
You're
I
more
mean,
up
Police
on
Squad's-
these things than I am,
I don't know.
but
I just sorry. Anyway.
but at 2 years old, I'm a big fan of Fantastic Voyage. So there you go. Or sorry, Forbidden Planet is what I mean to be saying. Yeah. I
You're
mix up
forgiven.
my sci-fi. Fantastic Voyage is the one where they go inside that person's body. Anyway, look at me, just screwing myself up left and right here, But I don't even know my lefts and rights, so like, I guess it's par for the course.
You can't even tie your shoes, Dan. So I don't know what's going on here.
They have Velcro, which it feels like space age technology to me. But
Yeah.
What are you gonna do? Look, the Venom fight is a lot of fun, and it's like visually very cool. And I feel like Todd McFarlane does a lot of heavy lifting here, including in that final image of the book where the red and blues come back. Mark, did you have any thoughts about this?
I mean, I guess it's a good opportunity to reintroduce the red and blues. I mean, my cynicism comes with, we'll see how long Marvel actually commits to the status quo. I mean, we kind of saw this a little bit, 20, 30 issues ago during DeFalco Friends, but maybe they'll stick with it. I mean, it's a beautiful image of him in the snow in that sterile Mayor Koch universe, right?
Look, if I like the image a lot, but if I have to be a little bit nitpicky, it is so weird, like how horizontal his posing is for an image that's defined by vertical space. Would it kill McFarlane to have like him like less hunched over, or to like draw Spidey's chest or something? Like, I know we give like Liefeld a lot of crap about drawing feet, but like can McFarlane not draw Spidey's chest? I get it. I'm willing to accept that his hips are like 5 feet wide, but like, is he having diarrhea? What's going on? Like he's so hunched over like this.
Wow, I mean, we've gone from scantily clad women to diarrhea jokes in this comic, Dan. So,
I'm too.
I mean,
like my humor is still devolving.
It's still developing. I get that. Do you have any other thoughts about how the red and blues were used here? I mean, would you have done it differently, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, maybe. Like, I could see I get the big splashy ending of this comic, and like the appeal of ending on like an up note like that. But I can't help but think that like if you move this scene earlier in the comic where MJ is really freaked out about Venom, you could have a Spidey versus Venom fight where Spidey's in the red and blues, and it just doesn't look like a big pile of black limbs, like wrestling with each other. Like give me some kind of like visual distinction between the two characters, because they do look very similar. I think Todd does everything he can to like, make it easy to read. But like, I do feel like I'm itching for a fight between Spider-Man and Venom, where Spidey's in his original costume and Venom's in the twisted version of the black suit. But I suspect we'll have another chance at this in the future. There's no way the FF are going to be able to hold him for that long.
Right, I gotcha. Well, Dan, you alluded to Todd McFarlane here. I mean, you're the art guy with your finger paints and stuff like that. What'd you think of what McFarlane put forward here?
Oh yeah, no, I mean like he has outclassed my finger paints, like in a huge way here. I can't say that he is like as formally trained as I hope to be someday, but like there's a coolness to this that even my like 2-year-old brain can latch onto and really feel like, like there's something really special going on here. Like it just seems so different than everything else. And I will include in that the previous 2 issues where I felt like he was kind of like trying to do like a Romita kind of thing. And here I feel like he's doing his Incredible Hulk stuff, in the pages of Spider-Man. And I think it's really exciting to see.
Well, I got to admit here, Dan, I mean, like, I really only started picking up Amazing Spider-Man a couple of issues ago, and it was that Alex Saviuk guy who was doing it then with some, I guess, John Byrne covers. But I got to say, like, this McFarlane guy, I mean, there's just something kind of, like, cool and radical about what he's doing here. I don't know how else to put it. Are those, like critiquing words, cool and radical? I don't know, but it's what I feel when I see it. So I it's kind of capturing my imagination and pushing it a little bit. So I'm very excited by McFarlane.
All right, Mark. Well, like I know there's not many of these. Like we've had issue 100, issue 200, and issue 300, which are all higher than I can count. But do you think that this is the best Centennial ever?
I mean, look, you made a valid point earlier about like, bringing back the burglar was kind of cool. I mean, I guess they kind of like, shot their shot in terms of like bringing back villains that we just didn't think existed anymore. I mean, like I said earlier with like Norman Osborn, I mean, dead is dead for the most part. I mean, and like, we already had a Doc Ock story a little while ago, so I can't imagine they'd be bringing him back. So I think like introducing a cool new radical villain like this and like, the McFarlane art, the kind of scantily clad MJ. I mean, I think I would put this number 1 and with 200 right behind it and 6-armed Spidey last. What about you?
I agree with all of that. I think the return of the red and blues was kind of enough for me, and the MJ in underwear thing, was a major plus. Like it's doing a lot for me at 2, like really shaping the way that I see the world. And yeah, and I being that I'm only 2, I didn't get to see the red and blues very much, like over the past 2 years. So this is a really big moment for me, to kind of see it on the page here. And so like that enough feels like, it's something important and worthy of a 300th issue. So, Mark, what grade are you going to give this issue?
I think I'm going to give this a solid B plus because I like I said, a lot to be excited about. Cool new villain, nice art. Some weird stuff and rivet gun stuff. So I can't go full Monty with it, but B plus is a totally respectable new issue, right?
Yeah, I think that's pretty good, especially you who tend, even though you've been reading this comic for like 5 issues, you tend to be a little more down on it than I am. So like, yeah, I'll give this one. I actually think I'm right there with you, a B plus for issue 300.
Awesome. All right, Dan. Well, why don't we take it home?
All right, Mark. So that was a bit of a taste of like what it was like when we were podcasting, 37 years ago now. Obviously, I think things have changed. I think we sounded a little more scripted back then than we were today. I think we weren't quite as confident. And we felt this kind of like incessant need to keep making pop culture references from the 80s. As if to like really lay in that we were defining the time that we were doing that book in. But I guess everybody talked like that back then.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I would say that, kind of going back, my recaps were still hilarious, Dan. So, I mean, that hasn't changed, right? I mean,
not at all. Not at all. But I think what has changed for us is kind of like what 300 means to us now. Like the day that it came out, like it was a big moment. We both gave it B pluses, and we liked it, as its own story. But I think, given the history of Venom over the years and like its place in our formative place in our collection, it's kind of taken on a greater meaning. You want to talk about that, Mark? Like, would you give it a B plus today? Do you see it warts and all and like it for more than what it is?
I honestly think I do at this point, Dan. I mean, like it's just like, I don't know, like it really clearly you didn't. I alluded to it in the review, but like, obviously time and whatnot has kind of shown us that like this comic has just had such a significant impact on me as a reader, as a fan of Spider-Man. It kind of like is really what ultimately drew me in. I mean, like, I think if I was just getting David Michelinie and Alex Saviuk comics, I mean, no disrespect to Alex Saviuk, who's just a very good, solid, artist, if not kind of, very, I don't want to say generic, but like there's nothing
He's a
about
Romita
Saviuk
protege.
yeah. I mean, he's a clone of Romita, but like Romita himself is Romita. You know what I mean? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's like why have the imitation when you can just have the real thing? And McFarlane was just so otherworldly to me as the run went on. And I think if it was like Michelinie and Saviuk for the whole time, I don't know if I would have been grabbed by Spider-Man specifically the way I did. I mean, I always enjoyed the character, but like I think it was like that McFarlane art and Venom specifically from this comic that was like, oh wow, like you can have a villain who's like the dark I mean, there was Bizarro Superman, but like this was different. This was edgier, and like, even how like MJ is in this issue, like everything felt edgier and modern and different and real. And yeah, I would bump that grade up now, I think. I mean, like it's not perfect, but its personal significance to me bumps it up for sure.
Yeah, and I don't think that it like holds quite the same place in my heart as it does yours, given that like
but you didn't discover it when I did, what I mean?
No,
like,
exactly. And like all jokes aside, yeah, I came to it much later, and I don't know that I would even list it in my like top 5 Venom stories necessarily.
yeah.
But like the importance of it is, is hard to shrug off, and it does kind of like, showcase the sort of like meteoric impact that Todd McFarlane had in the world of Spider-Man. And that I as much as I like joke and think that like maybe there's a better way to have introduced Eddie Brock, like that story is genuinely compelling as a sort of like motivation for someone to go after Spider-Man and make it very personal, especially the images in the church where he embraces the symbiote and that sort of like religious element to it, I think adds like a ton. That like really elevates the story in a way that like honestly is more personal than just about every villain that Spider-Man had up to that point. Like nowadays, especially in like the wake of like the Ultimate Spider-Man comic, like we're so used to like all of the villains being closely associated to Peter's origin or some element of his life. And really like outside of Norman Osborn, like there wasn't anything kind of like this. And so I do think it elevated, like itself in that way. And obviously Venom will become a huge hit. And, now he's not even really a Spider-Man character necessarily. So yeah, I have a lot of fun for this comic, warts and all. It is kind of at its bare essence a sort of like fist fight between two characters, but it hints at something much larger that would kind of go, I think, to like modernize Spider-Man, as you said, but also like reinvigorate the line to try to make like Spider-Man and his relationship with his villains more personal, even if it was David Michelinie who ultimately like paid off the idea of that.
Gotcha. No,
it's the return of Venom to me that's the really special one from this run in terms of like being a really like solid story that elevates Venom to new heights. Like him going after MJ is a big deal, but that opening like of that story where he's at Aunt May's house, confronting
Yeah,
Peter
yeah.
there, like I think had such ramifications of a guy that's just willing to insert himself in a really uncomfortable way into people's lives that would really like serve as like build on this story to like elevate it to something completely unseen in the pages of Spider-Man.
Yeah. And hence that is why that story is an essential. So go back and, well, we don't have the back issues anymore, right? So, but it's out there somewhere.
Yeah, it's in the feed. And
Yeah.
Mark, I know for a long time 300 was the one you wrote about as your favorite issue of Amazing Spider-Man. I know you've kind of jostled with that being like Nothing Can Stop the Juggernaut and things like that here and there, but does it still occupy that rarefied territory of amongst the top stories, or do you think that's more of a nostalgia pick?
That's a nostalgia pick, if I'm being completely honest. I mean, I think objectively, if I'm like, taking off my fan glasses and just looking at it from like it's probably, it could be Nothing Could Stop the Juggernaut, but it could also, it's probably also like, the Master Planner saga and like, the final chapter in that specifically, or, I mean, there are other, Amazing Spider-Man number 50 is always
Yeah.
up there for me, just in terms of, the arc of that. But like, again, it's hard to diminish the comic that made you a fan. And that I will never, that title has been decided. It was
Yeah.
Amazing Spider-Man number 300 for me. You know what I mean? So like, I am, by hook or by crook, I am known for being one of the most vocal Spider-Man fans on the internet. We've been podcasting for 38 years now or whatever. But in all seriousness, I mean, like it is a part of my personality at this point, and that personality was defined by this comic. So like it's. Is it objectively my favorite comic? Probably not, but like, how can I dismiss something that had that much of an impact on me?
And that's actually an interesting like point to kind of introduce a side topic here of like, look, pull back the curtain. We weren't actually podcasting 37 years ago, but that's to say, I think if we were, like, maybe our review wouldn't be quite as jokey, but I think we would have found real problems with this comic that like we laid out in that kind of jokey review. And we do that week to week here on the show, like critiquing these books and like that, but there's a different approach between like critic and fan or impressionable person reading a comic. And, I try to leave my heart open, to that sort of like fan, like just love of the thing that we're doing. But like you could take a comic like Amazing Spider-Man 300, a favorite of ours, and give it our sort of modern critical analysis in the way that we jokingly tried to do here, and showcase that like what we say about a comic as critics is oftentimes very different than how we feel about it or where it falls in our life as a fan. And sort of parsing the two of those things can make for an interesting conversation, or it can be difficult to do sometimes. Do you have any feelings about that?
I mean, I think you're right. I mean, like, look, I mean, like there were reviews we did of Superior Spider-Man that, of issues that we loved that I think like, with the context of like what Dan Slott and others went on to do, maybe, like if we had that context in real time, if we went back, we would give a different kind of review for those comics. You know what I mean? Like it just, but like that doesn't negate what we felt in the moment. And, like, yes, to continue the jokes over, folks. Those jokes that we were making at the comic's expense were, told from like we have a lot of history and context now to define things about this comic in a way that we couldn't in real time. But like, like at the same time, like what were my feelings in real time of the comic? It was total wonder and delight and awe. So, like I feel like we as critics, we're critics, but we're fans. So like sometimes like your initial read or even initial 3 reads of something, it can be in a vacuum, and that's what's so fascinating about this show. And the fact that we've been doing it for so long, Dan, is like, there's probably a lot of stuff that we have said on the show where maybe we wouldn't say it, like, like this Kindred is the greatest character we've ever seen. I mean, not that anyone has ever actually said that, but but there are things about that we were I think we would take back or reframe, and like it is what it is,
or
like,
things that we were critical of that ended up being like evolving into something really interesting.
Right. Yes.
Although I will
100%.
say that like our criticism of Silk and Mason Banks, I think still holds up. But
yes.
But yeah. Anyway, sometimes you're just right, and remain
true.
right.
Yeah. All right, Dan. Well, why don't we take it home for real now?
For sure, Mark. Bring us home.
All right, that brings us to the end of this episode, but we want to thank you, the listeners and viewers, for tuning into this episode of The Amazing Spider Talk. On the next episode of Season 7, we'll be talking about Jerry Conway's return to the world of Spider-Man in the pages of Spectacular and Web of Spider-Man. And guess what, Dan? We're going to be joined by none other than Jerry himself for his 10th appearance on our show. So be sure to subscribe and tune in for that episode. Man, it was so good to have. It's been a few years since we last had Jerry on, Dan, and I was just so thrilled to have Jerry talking, especially given some of the health scares he's had over the last couple of years. It was just like having literally an old friend back on the show chatting with us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I didn't realize it was his 10th appearance until I like looked into it and was like, holy crap, we've had Jerry Conway on the show 10 times. But
we've come a long way, baby.
To that note, as a reminder, this podcast exists because of the support of our listeners on Patreon, where for only $4.99 a month, the cost of a new comic, you can help support our show's existence while getting early episodes, including these reviews the same week the comics release, all of Season 7 of our show, exclusive artwork, and a ton of other bonuses. So again, thank you to everyone who supports us and our work. And if you want to join their ranks, please go to amazingspidertalk.com and click the Patreon button to sign up to join our club.
If you value Smarts Comics criticism and historical analysis, we hope you'll consider supporting us on Patreon. What we do on the show is admittedly niche. Still, if you find our Spider-Man commentary and community valuable, we can only continue doing what we do with your support on Patreon.
So, Mark, until we bond with intergalactic symbiotic aliens that amplify our inherent characteristics, for me, my gullible optimism, and for you, a crotchety man yells at cloud persistence, and it finally drives us apart, what's our motto?
With great podcasts, there must also come the amazing Spider Talk.